Picture this. A woman sits in Carl Jung's office in 1920s Zurich, tears streaming down her face as she realizes everything she believed about herself was a carefully constructed lie. What Jung told her that day would shatter her worldview, but ultimately set her free. Today, I'm sharing 8 brutal truths that Jung discovered about the feminine psyche, truths so powerful they can transform your entire relationship with yourself and others. The first truth hits like lightning. Jung observed that most women live their entire lives wearing masks, not just for society, but for themselves. He called this the persona, and discovered something shocking. Women often become so attached to their social masks that they forget who they really are underneath. Think about it. How many versions of yourself do you present in a single day? The professional woman at work, the nurturing mother at home, the supportive friend, the perfect daughter. Jung realized that while men typically have fewer but more defined personas, women tend to fragment themselves into countless pieces, each tailored to meet someone else's expectations. But here's what's truly disturbing. Jung found that this fragmentation doesn't just exhaust women, it literally splits their psyche. In his groundbreaking work, The Relations Between the Ego and the Unconscious, he wrote, "The persona is a complicated system of relations between individual consciousness and society, fittingly enough a mask, designed on the one hand to make a definite impression upon others, and on the other, to conceal the true nature of the individual. For women, this masking becomes so sophisticated that they often lose touch with their authentic desires, dreams, and instincts. I want you to pause right now and ask yourself, when was the last time you made a decision based purely on what you wanted, not on what others expected of you? If you're struggling to answer that question, you're experiencing exactly what Jung warned about. The second shocking truth Jung discovered is that women possess what he called the animus, the masculine aspect of their psyche that society systematically teaches them to suppress. Unlike the popular belief that femininity means being soft, accommodating, and emotional, Jung found that healthy women integrate their inner masculine qualities: assertiveness, logical thinking, ambition, and the ability to say no without guilt. He observed that women who deny their animus become what he termed animus-possessed, meaning they either become overly aggressive and hostile or completely passive and resentful. Jung wrote in Ion, "The animus is the deposit, as it were, of all woman's ancestral experiences of man, but in addition, he is also a creative and procreative being. This means your inner masculine isn't something to fight against, it's something to embrace." The women Jung considered most psychologically healthy were those who could access both their feminine intuition and their masculine decisiveness without apology. Here's what's revolutionary. Jung discovered that when women suppress their animus, they often project it onto men, becoming dependent on male partners to make decisions, take action, or provide direction in life. Sound familiar? How many women do you know who seem incapable of making major life choices without male approval? Jung saw this as a form of psychological imprisonment. The third truth will make you question everything about modern relationships. Jung found that most women enter romantic partnerships not out of love, but out of unconscious psychological need. He identified that many women seek men who embody the qualities they've been taught to suppress in themselves. The quiet woman seeks the outgoing man, the indecisive woman seeks the decisive man, the financially dependent woman seeks the provider. But Jung's most disturbing discovery was this: these relationships often become psychological prisons where both partners remain incomplete. In Marriage as a Psychological Relationship, Jung wrote, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." Yet he observed that many women avoid this transformation by choosing partners who allow them to remain unconscious. and dependent. The truly healthy relationships Jung witnessed were between two individuals who had done their psychological work separately. These women didn't need men to complete them. They chose partners to grow with. They understood that real love isn't about finding someone to fill your gaps, but about two whole people choosing to create something together. Think about your own relationships. Are you seeking someone to complete you or someone to complement you? The difference will determine whether you experience love or psychological dependency. The fourth shocking revelation involves what Jung called women's relationship with power. Through decades of analysis, he discovered that women often have a more complex and conflicted relationship with power than men do. While men typically pursue power directly, women, Jung observed, often pursue it indirectly through manipulation, emotional control, or martyrdom. Jung found this particularly troubling because indirect power games prevent women from owning their legitimate desires for influence and control. In his work with female patients, he consistently found that those who denied their desire for power often became what he called power behind the throne figures, exerting control through emotional manipulation rather than direct leadership. The healthiest women Jung encountered were those who could acknowledge their desire for power and pursue it ethically and directly. They didn't need to manipulate others emotionally because they were comfortable wielding legitimate authority. They understood that wanting power isn't unfeminine, it's human. Here's the question that might change everything. In what areas of your life are you using indirect influence when you could be using direct leadership? Jung believed that until women own their relationship with power, they remain psychologically immature. The fifth truth Jung discovered is perhaps the most controversial. Many women unconsciously compete with other women in ways that keep all women psychologically stunted. He observed that this competition often centers around male attention, but the deeper issue is what he called undifferentiated femininity. Women who haven't individuated, who haven't become psychologically complete individuals, often see other women as threats rather than allies. Jung noted in his clinical observations that women who had achieved psychological maturity naturally supported other women's growth and success. They didn't feel threatened by other women's achievements because they had developed their own sense of worth, independent of external validation. However, women stuck in unconscious patterns often engaged in subtle sabotage, gossip, or competition that ultimately harmed everyone involved. The psychological mechanism Jung identified is this: when a woman hasn't developed her own identity, other women become mirrors reflecting her inadequacies. Instead of using these reflections for self-development, unconscious women often attack the mirror. Jung's solution was radical. He encouraged women to form genuine friendships with other women based on mutual respect and growth, rather than shared complaints or competition. He found that women who had strong, supportive female friendships were significantly more psychologically healthy and had better relationships with men. The sixth devastating truth Jung uncovered relates to what he observed about women and sacrifice. He discovered that many women use self-sacrifice as a form of psychological manipulation, though they're often unconscious of this dynamic. Jung found that women who constantly sacrifice their own needs often do so not out of genuine love, but out of an unconscious desire to control others through guilt and obligation. In Psychological Types, Jung explored how this sacrificial pattern creates what he called psychological debt in relationships. The woman who constantly gives while keeping score creates an environment where everyone around her feels perpetually guilty and obligated. This isn't love, Jung realized. It's a sophisticated form of control. The truly shocking part is that women engaging in this pattern often believe they're being loving and selfless. Jung's breakthrough was recognizing that healthy love requires healthy boundaries. The women who were most genuinely loving were those who took care of their own needs first, then chose to give from abundance rather than emptiness. Jung observed that children of martyring mothers often struggled with guilt and resentment their entire lives, while children of self-caring mothers learned healthy relationship dynamics. The message is clear. Sacrificing yourself doesn't serve anyone. It creates dysfunctional patterns that repeat across generations. Ask yourself honestly, are your acts of giving motivated by love or by an unconscious desire to create obligation in others? The answer reveals whether you're operating from psychological health or unconscious manipulation. The seventh truth Jung discovered about women involves their relationship with their own sexuality and creative power. Through his analytical work, he found that many women had been conditioned to view their sexual energy as something shameful or dangerous, leading to what he called creative stagnation. Jung understood that sexual energy and creative energy come from the same psychological source, so suppressing one inevitably suppresses the other. Jung observed that women who had integrated their sexuality in healthy ways were consistently more creative, more confident, and more psychologically vibrant. They understood that their sexual energy wasn't just about physical attraction, but about their fundamental life force. These women had what Jung called psychological fertility. They could create, innovate, and bring new things into the world. Conversely, women who viewed their sexuality with shame or fear often struggled with creative blocks, depression, and a sense of feeling dead inside. Jung wrote in The Development of Personality, the creative mind plays with the objects it loves. For women, this love must include love and acceptance of their own sexual nature. Jung's most radical observation was that women who owned their sexuality without apology naturally attracted higher quality partners and had more fulfilling relationships. They didn't need to use sex as currency or withhold it as punishment because they understood it as a natural expression of their life force. This doesn't mean being promiscuous, Jung clarified. It means having a healthy, integrated relationship with your own sexual energy as part of your creative and life-giving power. The eighth and final shocking truth Jung discovered is perhaps the most liberating. Most women spend their entire lives trying to be good according to external standards, never realizing that psychological health requires integrating what he called the shadow, the parts of themselves they've been taught are unacceptable. Jung found that women's shadows often contain qualities like anger, ambition, selfishness, sexual desire, and the capacity for ruthlessness. Society teaches women that these qualities make them bad, so they repress them. But Jung's revolutionary discovery was that integrating these shadow qualities doesn't make women evil, it makes them complete. The women Jung considered most psychologically mature were those who could access their anger when appropriate, pursue their ambitions without apology, be selfish when necessary, and stand up for themselves even if others disapproved. These women weren't mean or cruel, they were simply whole human beings who had access to their full range of psychological resources. Jung observed that women who refused to integrate their shadow often became what he called nice woman syndrome sufferers. They appeared sweet and accommodating on the surface, but harbored deep resentment, passive-aggressive behavior, and often experienced depression or anxiety. Their repressed shadow energy had to go somewhere, so it manifested as psychological symptoms. In Memories, Dreams, Reflections, Jung wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." For women, this means acknowledging and integrating the parts of themselves they've been taught to hide. The process isn't comfortable. Jung found that women going through shadow integration often felt guilt and fear as they began expressing previously hidden aspects of themselves. but the result was psychological freedom and authentic relationships based on truth rather than performance. Here's what Jung discovered happens when women begin this integration work. They stop attracting people who want to exploit their niceness. They start making decisions based on their genuine values rather than others' expectations. They develop what Jung called psychological authority, a natural confidence that comes from being integrated rather than fragmented. The most profound change Jung observed was in these women's relationships. When they stopped pretending to be perfect, they started attracting people who loved them for who they really were. Their relationships became deeper, more honest, and more satisfying because they were no longer performing roles, but living authentically. But Jung's work revealed something else crucial. This integration process often requires women to disappoint people who benefited from their unconscious patterns. The people who liked you as a people pleaser might not like you as an authentic individual. Jung found this to be a necessary loss for psychological health. Now let me share what Jung considered the ultimate test of psychological maturity for women. He found that truly individuated women could hold paradox without anxiety. They could be both strong and vulnerable, independent and interconnected, loving and boundaried, ambitious and nurturing. They didn't need to choose between being feminine and being powerful because they understood these weren't opposites. Jung's clinical observations showed that women who achieved this integration became what he called natural leaders. Not because they sought power over others, but because their psychological wholeness naturally inspired others. They became the women other women looked to for guidance, the partners men respected as equals, the mothers who raised confident children. These women had learned what Jung considered the most important psychological skill, the ability to know themselves completely and love themselves anyway. They had faced their shadows, integrated their animus, removed their masks, and chosen to live as complete human beings rather than fragmented personas. The transformation Jung witnessed in these women was remarkable. They stopped seeking external validation because they had developed internal authority. They stopped trying to control others because they had learned to manage themselves. They stopped sacrificing themselves because they understood that self-care was a prerequisite for genuine service to others. But Jung also discovered something that might surprise you. These integrated women often faced resistance from others who preferred them unconscious and controllable. Family members who benefited from their self-sacrifice, partners who preferred them dependent, friends who bonded over shared complaints rather than shared growth. Jung found this resistance to be a crucial test. The women who maintained their growth despite external pressure achieved lasting psychological health. Those who retreated back to old patterns to maintain relationships remained stuck in unconscious cycles. This brings us to Jung's most important question for women. Are you willing to be disliked for being authentic, or do you prefer to be loved for being fake? Your answer to this question determines whether you'll live as a complete individual or remain a collection of personas designed to please others. Jung's work reveals that the journey to psychological wholeness isn't comfortable, but it's the only path to genuine fulfillment. The women who undertook this journey reported feeling truly alive for the first time in their lives. They discovered energy they didn't know they had, creativity they had suppressed, and a sense of personal power that no external circumstance could take away. The most beautiful thing Jung observed was how these women's transformation rippled out to affect everyone around them. Their children learned healthy relationship patterns. Their partners learned to relate to an equal rather than a dependent. Their friends experienced what authentic friendship could look like. Their work became an expression of their true gifts rather than a performance for approval. Jung's final observation about women who achieved psychological integration was this: they became sources of wisdom for others, not by giving advice, but by living as examples of what was possible. They showed other women that it was possible to be whole, authentic, and powerful, while still being loving, connected, and feminine. These 8 truths that Jung discovered aren't comfortable, but they're liberating. They reveal that most of what women have been taught about femininity serves to keep them psychologically incomplete. The path to wholeness requires courage, but Jung found that women who took this path experienced life in ways they never imagined possible. The choice is yours. You can continue living as a collection of personas designed to meet others' expectations, or you can undertake the challenging but rewarding journey of becoming a complete, integrated individual. Jung's work shows that both paths are possible, but only one leads to genuine fulfillment and authentic relationships. Jung's legacy for women is clear. You have the capacity for psychological wholeness, creative power, and authentic leadership. The only question is whether you're willing to claim these gifts and live as the complete human being you were meant to be. This is Carl Jung's radical vision for women, a perspective that challenged everything his era believed about femininity, and continues to challenge conventional wisdom today. But here in this exploration, our objective isn't to assert that this vision is the only correct one. We want to present Jung's thesis as an intellectual provocation, critical thinking, and instruction in an impactful yet secular manner, without inducing anyone to blind acceptance. The intention is to open space for critical thinking, encourage reflection, and allow each person to decide for themselves what to believe. We don't present an absolute truth, but rather a psychological and philosophical proposal that's worth knowing and questioning. The implications of Jung's discoveries extend far beyond individual psychology into the realm of what he called collective transformation. He observed that when women begin to integrate these 8 truths, they don't just change themselves, they begin to shift the entire social fabric around them. Jung noticed that psychologically integrated women naturally challenged systems and structures that relied on feminine unconsciousness to function. Consider how many institutions, from traditional family structures to corporate hierarchies, depend on women remaining fragmented, self-sacrificing, and dependent. Jung realized that as women achieved psychological wholeness, these systems would be forced to evolve or collapse. This isn't about destroying tradition, but about creating healthier foundations for human relationships and social organization. Jung's clinical work revealed something fascinating about the ripple effects of feminine individuation. He found that when mothers achieved psychological integration, their children naturally developed stronger boundaries and healthier self-concepts. When wives became psychologically complete, marriages either deepened into genuine partnerships or dissolved, making space for more authentic connections. When female colleagues integrated their animus and stopped using indirect power tactics, entire workplace dynamics shifted toward more honest and efficient communication. But Jung also documented the resistance that integrated women often faced. He observed what he called systemic pressure to return to unconscious patterns. Family members would guilt-trip women who stopped martyring themselves. Partners would become threatened by wives who developed independent opinions and ambitions. Society would label assertive women as difficult or unfeminine. Jung found this resistance to be a crucial indicator that the transformation was real and threatening to unconscious systems. He told his patients that if their growth wasn't making some people uncomfortable, they probably weren't changing deeply enough. The discomfort others felt was often a reflection of their own unconscious patterns being challenged by proximity to psychological authenticity. One of Jung's most profound observations was about what happened when women stopped seeking male approval as their primary source of validation. He found that this shift didn't make women anti-male or independent in a hostile way. Instead, it allowed them to relate to men as equals, rather than as authority figures or sources of identity. The relationships that survived this transformation became deeper and more satisfying for both parties. Jung documented case after case of women who discovered that their fear of male disapproval had been keeping them small and inauthentic. When they released this fear and began making decisions based on their own values and desires, they often attracted higher quality male attention. Men who were psychologically mature were drawn to their authenticity, while men who preferred controllable women naturally moved away. This process, Jung realized, served as a natural filtering mechanism. Women who had done their psychological work found themselves in relationships with partners who appreciated their wholeness rather than their brokenness. They stopped attracting fixers, controllers, and men who needed them to remain small in order to feel big themselves. Jung's research into feminine psychology also revealed crucial insights about the relationship between psychological integration and physical health. He observed that women who had integrated their shadows and animus reported fewer stress-related health issues, better sleep, more stable energy levels, and improved immune function. Jung theorized that psychological fragmentation created internal stress that manifested as physical symptoms. The women in Jung's practice who achieved integration often reported feeling more comfortable in their own bodies, having healthier relationships with food and exercise, and experiencing their sexuality as a source of vitality rather than anxiety or shame. Jung connected this to his broader theory that psychological and physical health were inseparably linked. Perhaps most significantly, Jung discovered that integrated women developed what he called psychological radar. They became extremely skilled at recognizing unconscious patterns in others and naturally attracted people who were either already psychologically healthy or genuinely committed to growth. They stopped tolerating relationships based on drama, manipulation, or unconscious role-playing. This psychological radar also protected them from predatory individuals who sought to exploit feminine unconsciousness. Jung found that women who had integrated their shadows were virtually immune to gaslighting, emotional manipulation, and other forms of psychological abuse because they trusted their own perceptions and maintained strong internal boundaries. Jung's work revealed that true feminine power wasn't about competing with masculine energy, but about fully embodying integrated feminine wisdom. These women became sources of what he called generative power, creating positive change through their presence rather than through force or manipulation. They influenced others through the magnetism of authenticity rather than through emotional coercion or strategic positioning. The ultimate gift Jung believed these women offered the world was proof that psychological wholeness was possible. By living as complete individuals, they provided a template for others to follow. Their very existence challenged the notion that women must choose between being powerful and being loving, between being independent and being connected, between honoring their own needs and caring for others. Jung's vision for the future involved more women undertaking this journey of integration, creating a critical mass of psychological health that would naturally transform society's relationship with power, leadership, and human connection. He believed that feminine individuation was not just personally healing, but collectively necessary for human evolution, beyond patterns of domination and unconsciousness. Jung's insights offer a framework for understanding feminine psychology that goes beyond traditional roles and expectations. His work suggests that true psychological health for women requires integration of all aspects of the self, including those parts that society often discourages. And now I want to know, which of these 8 truths resonates most strongly with your own experience? Have you recognized any of these patterns in your own life or in the women around you? Comment below and share your thoughts, because these conversations help all of us grow and understand ourselves better. If this perspective opened your mind to new possibilities, share this video with someone who might benefit from hearing Jung's insights. And subscribe to continue exploring the depths of human psychology and the path to authentic living.